Hello everyone, it's John, your local tropical scholar, and today I'll go over the very basics of international relations and cover the theory that most people in this field will tend to fall under or follow. After this lesson, I'm hoping you will learn the different paradigms of international relations, be able to identify examples of each of the paradigms, and know long cycle theory. Now, let me bring up the study guide and let's walk through it. First off, one of the basic things to go over is something called a paradigm. Think of this as the way that different points of view of international relations can be looked at. They describe the general thought process and claims that professionals use when thinking about why countries would behave a certain way. There are countless types of paradigms that can explain why countries interact with one another in a specific way, but in this course I'll mostly be going over 4. Realist, Liberalist, Constructivist, and Marxist. Disclaimer though, the Marxist paradigm was really only big thing throughout the 20th century. I just go over it because the majority of the politics and organizations that we have today have their roots in that time period. The first paradigm, and actually the most popular one, is the realist paradigm. You can summarize this paradigm as seeing everything as a power struggle that leads to security dilemmas. Under this belief, the only actors that matter to international relations are countries. Putting this all together, realists tend to not see cooperation as a viable path for countries to take, since it would only delay the inevitable conflict as the two most powerful countries begin to pick sides and pick their allies in the fight that will determine who is top dog. Conflict is something that cannot be avoided according to realist theory. The study guide gives a generic example that can be applied to anywhere, but a more specific example would be the Russo-Japanese War of 1904. Here, you have the Japanese as the established regional power with influence in Korea and China. Over time, Russia began to invest more in the area and compete with the Japanese influence in the region. After a while, Japan attacks Russia to prevent them from getting any stronger and ruining the leadership that Japan has established for themselves in the region. The second paradigm, and surprise, the second most popular paradigm, is liberalist. This paradigm tends to put more emphasis on both non-state actors like NGOs or suppressed ethnic groups, and more emphasis on the need for states to cooperate. Unlike the realist, who argues that all states will eventually get into conflict, the liberalist will say that war is not the only outcome and that peace with cooperation brings even greater gains than before. Then you have the constructivist, which sees the driving force behind international politics to actually be the individual. Under the constructivist paradigm, there's an emphasis on culture and ideas being the driving forces for human cooperation. A major claim under this paradigm is that the state is just a social construct that has multiple identities that are also socially constructed. And if a person can get enough people to listen to their ideas, then they can change the rules of their country or the international playing field. Finally, and keep in mind this paradigm is almost never used anymore, is the Marxist paradigm. If you've read the Communist Manifesto or anything related to Karl Marx, then you can probably guess where this paradigm is going. According to Marxist scholars, there is no national interest, only class interests. And these classes then team up and interact with one another through state interactions. Because of this, and the concentration of power into the elite class, the state is simply just a tool for the elite to pursue their interests according to the Marxist paradigm. Moving away from paradigms, there is one last theory that tends to affect a lot of international relations, and that is long cycle theory. Summarized, international relations tends to follow this huge cycle that repeats itself throughout history, and this cycle takes about 100 years to complete. The only thing that changes between each repetition of the cycle are the countries that are involved. The cycle tends to look like this. First, you have the great power that is in charge of everything and creates the rules that the international community follows. Then, over time, the great power becomes weaker and weaker due to something. As this great power gets weaker, another rising power becomes stronger over time. At this point, the rising power and the weakened old power will go to war to determine who becomes the new leader of the international community. Whoever wins this war creates the rules that the international community will follow for the next 100 years until there is another great power war. Well everyone, that is it for this lesson. I hope that the news makes more sense for listening to them talk about what is happening internationally. I'll have a study guide, a worksheet activity, and the answer sheet posted on my Patreon. If you like the laid back approach or want another way of presenting information, let me know in the comments below. I hope you all enjoyed the lesson. As always, take care.